Hey friends, welcome back to the Big Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award-winning director, producer, and author. And this is episode 506. This week, I am so excited to be in conversation with the amazing Esther Weinberg. Esther is a business growth accelerator. She equips executives to create game-changing breakthroughs, increase profitability, and cultivate sustainable virtual cultures, all while leading with dignity. As founder and chief leadership development officer of the Ready Zone, she moves leaders through change with proven systems to create big pivots, big impact, and big returns. A respected thought leader with firsthand experience, Esther has held executive positions at Disney and Fox. She's a graduate of New York University, and she's also a member of ProMax, Harvard's Institute of Coaching, and the Forbes Coaches Council. All right, everybody, let's do this. Esther, I am so excited to have you on the Big Talk Podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tricia. This is really great. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Me too. Before we dive in to everything that you have going on, I would love for you to take us back a little bit. What's your backstory? You can take it as far back as you want. And how did you end up here with me today?
It's like I was in the womb. No. No. So let's see how far I can go back. So I would say that I started my career originally in marketing and publicity, starting on the agency side. And I was originally doing that for products. I remember one of my first jobs was doing setting up marketing sampling campaigns all over the New York and Philadelphia area, because I'm originally born and raised in New York. And then I transitioned from that to work in marketing publicity on the entertainment side for an agency. And then eventually I left because I wanted to get out of the entertainment business, and I wanted to have just more exposure to other industries because I had come from different industries. And so I actually started doing marketing, finance, and publicity for a global financial company. And it was funny because, not to date myself, but back in the day when you used to read newspapers, and I was always taught in publicity, you read from back to front, because when I was in entertainment, the TV section was always in the back. And so the entertainment section was in the back. Or if you're a New Yorker, the New York Times, it's its own section. But anyway, but it's always in the back. And so I was in finance and reading back to front, and I thought, this is crazy. And so I wound up going back to entertainment. I wound up working for Fox when Fox had a studio in New York for FX. And then afterwards, I transitioned from that role to being recruited by Disney to come out to Los Angeles. And I headed up PR for all of their owned cable properties. Once again, probably dating myself. And then I left that, and I was the head of all publicity. It was a complex job. I was just telling someone else about it. I said, it kind of felt like I was working for a mini government. It was because Disney's such a huge company, and what I was overseeing. And then eventually I transitioned to start my own company. I thought I was going to start a PR firm. And then about 2 weeks in, I thought, I don't think I really want to do this anymore. And so I was quite lost for a while. And then I kind of stumbled on the whole concept of leadership development. And then I started off by getting trained and certified as an executive coach. And then I started doing organizational design and teamwork. And I started my own company. And that was an awfully long time ago. And then there was a certain point within that juncture that I wanted to do international development work alongside the leadership development work. And so I picked up and moved to Uganda, Africa, and did organizational work for not just in the evening, it'd be for entertainment on the literally video. And then during the day, it'd be for children's rights and human rights organization. It was like a wild time in my life. And then I came back to the United States, and I rebranded my company and started the footprint that people know now as the Ready Zone. And so that's basically how I got here. So it seems now when I tell it, it's like 3 seconds long, but it wasn't.
It's such a beautiful transformation. I love it, Esther. And when you think about through all of these different versions of yourself, did you always have your voice, or was there at one point that you realized, okay, I love what I'm doing in film, television, and theater, or in the Hollywood part of your world, but Was that the transition into you really finding and having your voice?
It's so funny that you say that because I remember an exact moment, and this is going to sound really woo woo for your audience, because it's interesting for someone who's not so woo woo, sound a little woo. I was at, I
We
was
are
talking.
very woo woo here.
Well, I was literally, a friend of mine told me to go see a channeler. I had never believed in any of this, and I remember I was sitting with her. This is before I went to Uganda, and she said, "You need to go to Uganda because you need to find your voice and give yourself the right, the rights that you're looking to give others. You need to give yourself." And
Wow.
I thought, wow, powerful, right? On the face, like powerful message. Okay, yes, I'm going to do this, but you don't know until you look in the rearview mirror really what it looks like. And when I look back on it now, I don't know if I knew what my voice was. And also to be a stand for what my voice was, I don't think so. So I think Uganda helped me. My experience in Uganda really helped me develop it and see it. And it was I would say it wasn't an easy road because I think if I look back, while I was cocky and confident about certain things, it's different than having a voice. If you know
What
what I
does
mean.
having a voice mean to you?
I think that having your voice means that it reminds me of a quote that I read this morning from Byron Katie, which said, "You don't have to like me. My job is to like me. Your job isn't to like me. My job is to like me." I think that's what the quote is, and I think that that's it wasn't necessarily that, but what I mean by your voice is knowing authentically what you stand for and not being either feeling shameful about it or reserved or resigned, to share that in a way that really represents who you are in the world, that doesn't make someone else wrong for who they choose to be.
Right.
So I find that for me to really have a voice, I have to make it okay for you to have your voice too. And
Hmm.
so, because it's a shared experience. And also I'm a big believer in human dignity. So I can't I can't profess that if I don't choose to give that to you too. And so that's what I would think, that having a voice is being authentically who you are while not making you wrong for having a voice that you have, even if I wildly disagree with it. But
I
I don't make
love
you
that.
wrong for it.
I love that so much. Dignity is one of our values here at the Big Talk, along with inclusion, respect, curiosity, humility, collaboration, and love. And when you're talking about leading with dignity, it does require you to also embody humility.
That's right. That's right.
And how are you doing that now inside of your work with Ready Zone?
Ugh, wow. It's I love what you're asking because it's funny when you were talking, I was thinking about sometimes I have found early on when I was talking to folks about human dignity, people would collapse it with, "Oh, that means I can't fire anybody." It's like, okay, well, first of all, how do we get there? But dignity has nothing to do with firing people. It has to do with how you treat people. And so you can lovingly let them go rather than saying, "I'm sorry, but you stink and you got to get out. And here's a security guard to usher you out the door." That's not dignified.
Right.
So the Ready Zone is all about, what we're all about is creating workplace environments where trust, respect, and psychological safety are not just valued. Because if you say that to most people, they don't argue with that. But they're as measured as the bottom line. And so we've created 6, what you would affectionately call KPIs. We call them zone performance indicators, that you can diagnose whether or not you're doing that for yourself, for your team, or for your organization. And I find that leaders, when we share the framework with leaders, it becomes it gives them the clarity that is really needed to know where to go. Because lots of times people want to feel ready to take advantage of all the opportunities and challenges at their feet, especially we're in an environment right now of so much change. It's like, nuts on nuts, right? And so the question really is, how do you do it? And it was interesting because I was reading a Microsoft report the other day, and they were talking about that they said that employees who report that they have clarity in their work priorities are almost 4 times as likely to say they plan to stay at the company for at least 2 years, 7 times as likely to say that they don't think about getting a new job, and 4.5 times of saying like they're currently happy in the job that they're at. So when you think about retaining people, what you and I are talking about is not an amorphous concept. It's actually very integrally tied with a return on investment that you can measure on a balance sheet and you can measure on a profit and loss statement.
That's incredible. So you're directly connecting dignity with people understanding what they're in charge of so that they don't feel like they're just walking into chaos and uncertainty every single day.
That's right. That's right. It's very important because it's so interesting. We work with a lot of companies that are also that have merged, and also companies that have lost people. So, as an example, there was an executive that I was working with most recently, and she was president of the division, and the organization came to her and said, "We need to cut." It came to her boss and said, "We need to cut $75 million out of your budget." And so, can you imagine, like, okay, where do you begin? And of course, the first thing is people, right? The first thing is slash and burn of people. And so, and then she's like, this is terrible because I know that I'm going to have to let good people go. And then what happened was she got a script that said, this is how you let people go. And she's like, I've never let more than like 2 people go in my life. And how do we do this in a way that really honors who they are as we're ushering them out the door? And so we had a whole conversation about how do you treat people with dignity when they're leaving the door too. But it's not, it's not a disparate thing to discuss. I think that when you and I talk about human dignity, you and I could talk about human dignity because that's shared common language between us. But inside corporations and organizations, that language doesn't necessarily have glue and stickiness. But having psychological safety inside an organization has a real consequence if it's not those measurements are not met inside of effectiveness of people and teams. That
I
can
love
can absolutely be measured 100%.
Tell me more about measuring psychological safety.
Well, here's a great example. So there's a team that I'm working with, and we did a team assessment on their effectiveness. And it was interesting is, it sounds very normal, right? You do a blanket assessment, you bring everybody together, you share out, you talk about what's next, and you create some steps and all that. And by the second session, it was like people are not talking. They're talking, but they're not talking, if you know
Mm.
what I mean. Like they're talking, like they're saying right things, but without depth. Like, well, what do you mean by that? Oh, yes, I can demonstrate. Okay. It's kind of like the language that you hear when executives try to position a change, but it sounds like a lot of buzzword bingo, as a mentor of mine would say.
Yep.
And so instead, I just said to the executive, look, there's something going on here. Let me meet with your team and find out what's happening. And what happened was that it's leader plus them, as always, right? And so there is not psychological safe. People don't feel safe to speak up because there's there's repercussions if they do. The team has not been set up right with agreements of how they treat each other, so it's all over the place. That's so common with teams, right? Especially today, you throw people together, you go, oh, you're a team, work together. No, sorry, it doesn't work that way. Like, where's the vision of where we're going? Or if you don't have vision, where's the purpose? And not only that, what I find most teams don't even do, if you even do that work, is that I have teams do a team commitment. Like, here's the declaration of what we're committed to doing together when we're together. This is like our pledge to each other of how we're going to treat each other. And then we create some agreements around it. So then if I step all over myself or I step all over you, I can actually tend to what we've agreed to rather than, oh, your personality, or you're not in a good mood, you're too direct, you're too passive. And so there's a real sense, and you can measure that, you can see that, and that's very practical and pragmatic.
I love this. First of all, teaching people how to create an environment that is safe so that everyone can speak up, going back to using your voice,
Yeah,
and talking about this container that you teach people how to create so that everyone has a clear understanding of what they've agreed to. It's exactly the same thing as when I'm in a studio with actors and I'm directing them. The space
yeah,
has to be safe or
absolutely.
they're not going to be their best selves. Same thing with speakers. If you are creating an environment of safety, then, and you know this, you can speak truthfully, vulnerably, and that's when the magic happens.
That's right. And I think there's also a common misperception too that this conversation around transparency, because I don't believe that you can be 100% transparent. If you think about it, you're working in publicly traded companies, and or you're working in privately traded companies and organizations, and there's some things that are just not appropriate to say in this moment, or not appropriate to say in a full disclosure. You can't. And so you can get my thing is you always get right up to the edge of it. As long as you get right up to the edge of it, where you people can feel included and they feel that they're communicated with. What is it, the data that shows 75% of all change efforts fail, even to this day, post COVID, even more so, right? And one of the things people talk about most often is communication. There's not an organization I know that doesn't have the word communication associated with something that's off the rails, needs some work, or that's not terrible, but it could always use some work. And
Hmm.
so, how do we get it right up to the edge where people feel like they're included as much as we possibly can, and where they feel and they know that we're doing the best to be able to share as much as possible, and also position it ongoingly so that people are informed and updated. And also, the only thing I have also is my word. If I tell you I'm going to do something and I don't do it, man, am I screwed. Talk about trust gone like that, just in an instant. But if I can actually say something to someone and honor what my word is, or renegotiate my word, people don't even know that you can renegotiate your word. Of course you can. The worst thing you could do is say something and not do it. At least if you can renegotiate, then people know that they can trust you. And that's actionable and measurable.
I love that idea of giving us permission to renegotiate our word. I think so many people don't keep their word because they're unable to revisit it and say, I changed my mind. I'd like to revisit like what I shared with you because I'm different today. That's so
Yes.
powerful, Esther. I love it.
Absolutely. And we should be able to do that as human beings. I mean, as long as it's not, okay, we're going to go in this direction. And then 2 days later, no, we're going in that direction. And 3 days later, we're going in that direction. So it has to be some symmetry to it. But you're 100% right. Absolutely.
Amazing. I love this conversation. Will you share with us what's coming up for you?
Yeah. So we're launching a executive think tank for the executive vice president level starting at the end of January next year. And we're looking for participants to be part of it. It's cross industry, cross function. And the reason why we've really selected that level is because I got to tell you that I think it's a neglected level. That there's a reason why it's lonely at the top. They're right at C-suite level, if not operating at C-suite level. They're neglected, and they're the ones that are making key decisions that are making the lifeline of the organization work, especially during these times of vast change. And it's like investing in your A players, no matter what the level is. And so that's what the conversation will be: part sharing, part addressing top of mind issues in a very confidential space.
Amazing. And we will put all of the links to this in the show notes.
That'd be great. That'd be great. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Are you ready for some fast talk, Esther?
I'm ready for it. I'm ready for it. I love
What's your
this.
favorite book?
My favorite book today, if you asked me yesterday, it'd be different, but today it's Wolf Pack by Abby Wambach.
Such a great book. Do you listen or read?
I
Do you
read.
listen? Yeah, she's got a good audiobook too.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
I'll
it's
download
it's it's cool to hear her speak that book.
it. Okay, good.
Um, who's your favorite speaker and why?
Dr. Susan David. Do you know who she is?
No.
She wrote a book called Emotional Agility, another one of my
Mm,
favorite books. And I remember I heard her speak at a Harvard conference. And when I heard her speak for the first time, I was captivated. She was one of the most genuine, authentic speakers I had ever seen. And it was the first time I had ever heard someone give us permission to feel.
Ooh, love that. Love that.
Mhm.
How do you memorize when you're speaking?
I write it all. I do exactly what you're probably going to say I should not do, which I write it all out like a script, and I rehearse it as a script. And I actually rehearse it with my wife. Poor thing. Um, she's a very discerning audience, and she'll say, "You don't sound authentic. That doesn't flow." So she's a great critic. So I want to ensure that it's one thing about knowing it, but embodying it. And I
You
may
are
even re-record it and listen to it as I fall asleep at night, or listen to it as I'm driving in the car too.
This is exactly what I teach my speakers. You're absolutely right on point.
Okay.
Amazing. What do you do the day before you speak?
Re-review, create talking points, and dance.
Love it. I love that you dance too. What podcast are you currently obsessed with?
We can do hard things with Glennon Doyle.
Another good one.
Yeah.
Well, Esther, thank you so much for being a featured guest today on The Big Talk. Where can our listeners get in touch with you?
At thereadyzone.com. It's like it sounds, TheReadyZone.com. That's the best way.
Amazing. And of course, this will all be in the show notes, everybody, so you can grab it there. Thank you so much for dropping in with us today. If you happen to be watching this on the YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get access to all the latest episodes. And if you are a listener of the podcast, I so appreciate your time. And remember, your voice matters. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and let us know what you think. Big love, everybody.